My son stood up in a crowded restaurant and called me a loser right to my face. His mother, my ex-wife, didn't say a word. Her new husband just smirked. And I said nothing. I simply finished my drink, paid the bill, and went home. By Monday morning, I'd already begun the process of taking back everything he thought was his. The car, the penthouse, and the company he believed he built. Because my son was about to learn a painful truth. A loser like me built his entire world. And a loser like me could take it all away. My name is Reginald Coington. I'm 72 years old, and I've learned something about silence over time. There's a silence of peace, the silence of understanding, and the silence that comes when you're holding back a storm. That night at a place called the Gilded Fork, I was using the third kind. The Gilded Fork was Richard Lawson's domain, my ex-wife Brenda's new husband. Everything about it reeked of money and insecurity. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen rain above the tables. Every laugh felt rehearsed. Every fork clinked like a line in a script. Richard had picked it, of course. He liked stages, especially the kind where other men could be props in his performance. And tonight, I was one of them. My suit, a Hart Schaffner mark from 20 years ago, was still sharp, perfectly pressed. But in a room filled with cashmere and shallow confidence, it looked like an antique. A suit of substance in a sea of style. Across the table, my son Andre leaned back in his velvet chair, performing for his new audience. His wife Brittany studied me the way one might study a flaw in an otherwise polished surface. Every glance carried judgment, the quiet, cold kind. Andre swirled his wine and said, loud enough for neighboring tables to notice, "The company's exploding, Richard. We just closed our second round of funding. Investors are lining up." Brittany giggled on cue. "You deserve it. Honey, you've worked so hard." I didn't respond, because I already knew where every single one of those so-called investors came from, and not $1 was his. Brenda, my ex-wife, smiled, her face tight from years of pretending contentment. 5 years with Richard had polished away the woman I once loved, leaving someone who measured worth by handbags and dinner reservations. "Our son is brilliant, isn't he, Reggie?" she asked, eyes sharp with comparison. It wasn't a question. It was a message. "Our son is brilliant, unlike you." I simply nodded and took another bite of steak. Perfectly cooked, tasteless all the same. When Richard finally spoke, his tone was thick with that false mentorship men like him mistake for wisdom. "Ambition is everything, Andre. Your father's a good man, a fine engineer, but he never had that spark. He builds things for others, never an empire for himself. In this world, if you're not building, you're being buried." A compliment wearing the mask of condescension. Andre soaked it in. "Exactly," he said eagerly. "I've tried to tell Dad that. He doesn't get it. All this talk about savings and stability, it's outdated." That word hung in the air, outdated. The same one he'd used last time when he called me cautious. He didn't know yet that outdated had built every dollar in his bank account. The time before that, he called me traditional. Before that, cautious. The words changed. The contempt never did. Dinner rolled on like performance with no audience left to impress. Andre filled the table with noise. Talk of their penthouse overlooking the city, the new watch Brittany bought him just because, the Bali vacation already booked for next month. Each story landed like a pebble thrown into still water, meant to make ripples, meant to be seen. And me? I was a wall they threw their stones at, just to hear the echo bounce back. When dessert arrived, a 7-layer chocolate tower that probably cost more than my utility bill, Richard lifted a hand. "Check, please." On my account. Casual tone, deliberate glance. Another power play. And that was when Andre, full of wine and arrogance, pushed his chair back so hard it screeched against the marble floor. Heads turned. He wanted them to. "See," he said, his voice slicing through the restaurant. "That's the difference. Dad's a loser." He pointed at Richard. "Mom's new husband isn't." The room went deathly quiet. Even the servers froze mid-step. Brenda, my ex-wife, stared at her plate. Her silence was a final betrayal. Brittany smiled faintly, satisfied. Richard leaned back, smug, and Andre stood there, my son, the boy who used to beg me to take him fishing, now performing my humiliation in front of strangers. I looked at him, really looked. For a split second behind the designer clothes and cheap confidence, I saw that little boy again, scared, confused, but it was gone before I could reach it. The rage I expected didn't come. Instead, I felt something sharper, cold, precise, the kind of calm that comes before demolition. I folded my napkin, placed it neatly beside my untouched dessert, and rose from my chair. No sound, no drama, just purpose. I met each of their eyes, Brenda, Richard, and finally Andre, and then I walked out. No words. The heavy door shut behind me like a full stop at the end of a long, unnecessary sentence. They thought they'd won. But the real conversation was only about to begin. Outside, the Atlanta night was cool and clean. The air bit at my face, clearing the fog that had followed me for years. I didn't call a cab. I walked, away from the noise, away from the table, away from them. The lights of the rich district faded behind me until I reached my own neighborhood. Quieter, older, honest. My home stood beneath a wide oak tree, solid brick walls, built 30 years ago by my own hands. Not flashy, but would outlast every glass tower in that city. Inside, everything was exactly as I'd left it. Orderly, deliberate. The scent of mahogany and old paper filled the air. This was a place made of substance, not performance. I didn't turn on the TV, didn't pour a drink. Anger clouds judgment, and I needed clarity tonight. I went to my study, a small room with purpose. Blueprints of bridges and buildings lined the walls, creations that still stood decades later. Real things, things that lasted. On my desk sat a framed photo. Andre, 5 years old, on my shoulders at a job site. He wore a plastic construction helmet 3 sizes too big, grinning like the world was his. For a long time, I just looked at it, not with sadness, but with acceptance. Somewhere along the way, I'd mistaken quiet love for limitless tolerance. That mistake ended tonight. I sat in my old leather chair and turned on my computer. Slow, humming softly, dependable. The screen's glow carved my reflection out of the dark. No web browsing, no news, just a password, a string of letters, numbers, and symbols no one else on Earth knew. The interface appeared, simple, sterile, coded. Each folder name was meaningless to anyone else, but I knew every one of them by heart. Covington Holdings, LLC, Oakwood Properties, LLC, AC Tech Solutions, Seed Funding Agreement, BMW 7 Series Lease, Richard Lawson, Consulting Schedule. Every line on that list was a quiet thread connecting my son's entire world to me. His penthouse, his company, his car, all of it traced back to these foundations. Invisible like rebar inside concrete. Hidden strength. Remove it, and the whole structure collapses. I open my secure email. Recipient, Alicia Warren. Attorney, friend, architect of the invisible fortress I'd spent decades building. The message was short, no greetings, no explanations. Subject, initiate sunset protocol. Body, Alicia, we meet tomorrow morning. Your office, 8 a.m. Begin dissolution for all assets related to AC and its affiliates. Priority 1, the vehicle. Reggie. I hit send. The whoosh of the outgoing mail was soft. Final, the first domino had been set. I leaned back in my chair, not satisfied, not angry, just steady. The same calm that comes before testing the strength of a bridge. Andre believed he had built something unshakable. Tomorrow, he would learn what happens when the hidden supports are quietly removed. Morning came gray and clear. Alicia's office tower rose above Centennial Park, glass, steel, and quiet authority. It smelled of coffee and competence. She greeted me not with a handshake, but with a mug already in her hand. Morning, Reggie. Black. No sugar. The way you drink it when you mean business. She knew me too well. For 20 years, she'd been my strategist, the only person alive who knew how deep my roots went. She didn't sit behind her massive desk. She took the chair beside mine. Equal footing. When I saw the word Sunset Protocol, she said quietly, I hoped I'd never have to read them. I really thought he'd come around. I stared into my coffee. It was dark, bitter, perfect. So did I said. But the sun's gone down, Alicia. It's time to turn off the lights. Her eyes sharpened. Chess player focus. No hesitation. All right, she said softly. Tell me everything. I know the structure, but I need to hear the reason. What finally broke it? I looked out at the city, the skyline I'd helped build, then back into the reflection of my coffee. He called me a loser, I said, and this time he meant it. He called me a loser, called Richard, my ex-wife's new husband, a winner, and Brenda just sat there and let it happen. I looked up from my coffee mug and met Alicia's eyes. He believes it, I said quietly. He truly believes he built the world he's standing on. Today, we show him what happens when the ground beneath him shifts. Alicia leaned forward, all business. Then let's start where it hurts the most, AC Tech Solutions, the crown jewel of his illusion. I nodded, exhaling slowly. Andre's always had ambition, I said, my voice steady. Big dreams, big talk. He wanted to be the next Steve Jobs, the next visionary from Atlanta, but he had no discipline, no patience, and no money. I could still see his face the day he came to me with that messy, overdesigned pitch deck, charts, buzzwords, a promise of disrupting the software market. He didn't want a mentor. He wanted an investor. He didn't want my advice. He wanted my wallet. So I gave him one, just not the way he thought. I told him I couldn't help. I continued, said my money was tied up in boring retirement funds. He called me old-fashioned and left disappointed. He never knew I was already setting the plan in motion. Alicia's sharp mind filled in the rest. That's when you came to me, she said. We created a silent trust, Delaware-based, fully anonymized, seeded with $2 million. Then we formed Innovate Future Group, a shell venture firm on the West Coast. We found a retired Stanford professor to act as its public face, the perfect disguise. Andre thought he'd been discovered by Silicon Valley investors who saw his genius. I smiled faintly. He even flew to San Francisco to pitch, walked out with a check and a God complex. And he never once wondered who really signed it. Alicia added, he never thought to ask who truly owned Innovate Future Group. She tapped her tablet, the screen filled with charts and ownership diagrams. AC Tech Solutions, 60% owned by Innovate Future Group, which in turn is wholly owned by your trust. Andre holds 20%, with the rest reserved for future employees that don't exist yet. You, Reggie, are the board, the majority shareholder, and the actual owner. He isn't the boss. He's an employee, the highest paid one in your company. I leaned back, the irony settling like cold steel in my chest. Next, Alicia said, the symbols, the ones he thinks define success. The car. I said, the words bitter in my mouth. The BMW 7 Series, sleek, black, spotless. Andre said it was essential for image, for closing big deals. The boy who once bragged about maintaining a used Ford by hand now measured his worth by German horsepower. Alicia's fingers swiped across her screen. He tried to lease it under AC Tech, but his credit wasn't strong enough. So we created Covington Holdings, LLC, an asset management firm he thinks is third-party. He signed without reading. The contract clearly states, the vehicle is property of Covington Holdings, provided for the use of an active employee of AC Tech Solutions. I finish her sentence. And the moment he's not an employee, the car, she said, returns to its rightful owner. My lips curved, not in satisfaction, but something colder. So my son, who calls me a failure, drives my car, paid with my money from a company he doesn't even own. The irony burned slow and deep. And now, Alicia said, her tone softening, the penthouse. I exhaled. That one still carried weight. That was about Brenda as much as Andre. I admitted, after she left me for Richard, she'd turned materialism into a religion. Every conversation revolved around appearances, luxury, status. And Andre learned well. They'd searched for months for the perfect place, something that screamed success from every marble corner. They found the Oakwood penthouse. Pre-war charm, modern finish, rooftop views. Andre told me about it like a kid showing off a trophy, but complained it was just out of reach. He asked if I'd help with the deposit. I told him no. I said quietly, told him to live within his means. Alicia smiled knowingly. And what you didn't tell him was that you bought the entire building 3 years ago. It was true. A good investment, undervalued and well located. Old engineer's instinct, I said. Numbers made sense. Alicia's grin widened. It was more than that. It was poetic. When Andre applied to the penthouse, the management company, our company, offered him a special incentive lease, a discount for high-profile tenants. He bragged for weeks about that once-in-a-lifetime deal. He never realized his father had written it. The fine print. Alicia continued. It states that the lease is contingent upon continued employment with AC Tech, and that management can terminate with 72 hours notice for any behavior that reflects poorly on the property. So there it was, the empire, piece by piece. His company, his car, his home, every pillar built by my hand, every beam supported by my name. He wasn't self-made. He was living on borrowed scaffolding. Scaffolding he never once looked down to notice. I looked at Alicia. Everything he thinks he owns, I said, is actually mine. She leaned back, eyes sharp, satisfied. Then the structure sound. The next question is, where we begin dismantling it. I thought about Andre's smirk at dinner, the way he raised that wine glass with his manicured hand, wearing the watch I bought, driving the car I owned, returning to the penthouse I paid for. My voice came calm, quiet, final. We start with symbolism. I said, take the car. The car, I said without hesitation. A winner shouldn't have to ride the bus. Alicia tapped the tablet, fingers moving like a pianist. The car it is, she confirmed, voice narrowed to pure professional focus. A tow truck will be dispatched to his address at 9 a.m. Monday. Reason, termination of the corporate lease. Swift, legal, clean. She looked up. What's the larger strategy, Reggie? Full blitz, car, corporate counts, eviction, all at once? We could be finished by noon on Monday. I shook my head slowly, eyes fixed on the skyline I'd built with other men's sweat and my own stubborn hands. No, I said, that's destruction. That's revenge. This isn't revenge. What is it about, then? She asked gently. I searched for the right words, thinking like I always had. As an engineer, when you bring down a building, I told her, you don't light a fuse and pray. That's messy. That hurts the neighborhood. A controlled demolition is precise. You remove the fixtures first, the shiny things people admire, then the windows, the view, then floor by floor until only foundations remain. I don't want to destroy my son, I said. I want to strip away the false life he's been handed. I want him to feel the cold foundation and finally understand what it takes to build something that lasts. Alicia listened the way a daughter of a carpenter listens. She knew the language of careful removal. It's also legally cleaner, she said. Separate, defensible corporate and property actions. No single move looks like a personal vendetta. It's airtight. Exactly, I thought. So we start with the car on Monday. The symbol. He feels the loss. Tuesday, freeze AC Tech's corporate accounts. Cut his power, his payroll, Richard's consulting retainer too. Let the well run dry. Wednesday, deliver the eviction notice. Piece by piece. He learns the value of each thing only when he no longer has it. A heavy quiet settled between us. This wasn't a plan born of fury. It was a curriculum. Painful, necessary, measured. Alicia's nod was small and sure. I'll prepare the documents. Timeline and forms ready by Monday morning. I stood, my bones complained in a language older than words. I placed my hand on the door handle and said, barely audibly, let the lesson begin. The rest of the week moved with the quiet of a place where weighty things happen without fanfare. After Alicia's office, a strange peace wrapped around me. Decision made, mechanisms engaged, no more talk, only execution. I spent Friday and Saturday among the roses. Pruning is a surgeon's work for a gardener. Remove the dead to save the living. Snip, a dead limb falls. Snip, an overgrown sucker cut back to the stalk, so the main stem may feed. I thought about that as I worked. Entitlement is a disease. It must be removed or it strangles the whole plant. I was the gardener. I was being ruthless out of love. Throughout the weekend, my phone buzzed relentlessly. Andre's name flashed. I watched it like a child watches a kite. Weeks ago, I would have answered the first ring. Now I let it blink itself into silence. Brenda called later. I didn't answer. Her dinner table silence had been an answer enough. That night I read. Not the headlines, not the noise, but a measured life and a biography of a leader who absorbed blows and outlasted storms. The lesson was plain. Loudness is not strength. Quiet positioning is. Sunday brought church and clarity, a sermon on accountability that settled like an old truth onto my shoulders. After the service, I sanded oak in the workshop, the repetitive motion steadying me. The phone lay silent on the counter, and I liked that. They assumed I was sulking. They had no idea the gears were turning. As the sun dipped, painting Atlanta in molten gold, I thought of the name I'd given the plan. Sunset Protocol. Fitting. Precise. Necessary. The sun was setting on my son's life as he knew it, and by morning with the dawn his education would begin. Not a lesson in cruelty, a lesson in consequence. I felt no triumph, no vengeance. Only that quiet, weighty certainty of an engineer who has double-checked his calculations and knows what comes next. While I spent my weekend pruning the roses, cutting away the rot, my son was out celebrating the very arrogance that had brought him here. Later, from the voicemails and panic messages that followed, I'd pieced together the weekend soundtrack. Laughter through Bluetooth speakers, the hum of the highway, the hollow music of ego. Dude, you should have seen his face, Andre said, bragging into the open air of his BMW. I called him a loser right to his face. He just walked out. Total drama queen. A pause. What's he gonna do? He'll get over it. He always does. He mistook silence for surrender, patience for weakness. That same night, while I was reading about President Grant's steadiness in the face of betrayal, Andre was sprawled across a couch in his penthouse, Brittany beside him, both bathed in the blue glow of luxury. "Should I get this one, babe?" she asked. Turned the tablet toward him. A gold watch with a diamond bezel. Andre laughed. "Of course. We deserve it. Especially after dinner. After the way my dad acted. Honestly, we need to treat ourselves after that embarrassment." He had no idea that embarrassment was the least of what was coming. To him, the world was a mirror, and it only ever reflected himself. Later that night, he called Richard, seeking approval, like a son calling a father. "You did the right thing," Richard told him smoothly. "Sometimes you've got to set boundaries with people from a different generation. They don't understand the mindset of winners." Andre laughed softly. "It's good to finally have a real role model to look up to. A real role model whose entire empire was propped up by contracts I controlled. The irony would have been amusing if it weren't so pathetic." By Sunday night, he stood at the penthouse window, gazing down at the jeweled sprawl of the city. He probably thought of me, the old man in the quiet house, and felt pity. He likely told himself, he'll call. He always calls. But he was wrong. This time, I had something better than hope. I had a plan. The house was dark, except for one lamp glowing on the oak desk. 10 p.m. The stillness in the air wasn't peace anymore. It was the tight silence before a storm. Then, at 10:01, the computer chimed. An email. Sender, Alicia Warren. Subject, update. I opened it. The body contained just 6 words, centered on a field of white. The first domino has been pushed. Monday morning. The world was gold and blinding. Sunlight glancing off chrome and glass as the city woke up. In the penthouse, espresso hissed from a machine, steam curling like smoke from a distant battlefield. For Andre, the day began like victory. He was whistling, half-dressed, nodding his tie in the mirror. Brittany hummed beside him, dabbing foundation on flawless skin. "You sure you don't want to drive you today?" she asked. "We could take the bands." My spa appointment's not till 11. He grinned at her reflection. Nah, I've got a client lunch. Gotta roll up in the Beamer. You know how it is, images, everything. He kissed her cheek. We've earned this, right? We're winners. She giggled. Go get him, big shot. He grabbed his briefcase and swaggered into the private elevator that led to the resident's garage. The mirror doors slid shut, carrying him down in silence. The doors opened to polished concrete, perfectly lit. There it was, his BMW, long, black, flawless. His kingdom on wheels. He hit the key fob. The lights blinked. The car purred in greeting. Then he saw it. A tow truck. Old. Grimy. Yellow hazard lights pulsing against the silver walls. A man in oil-stained overalls crouched by the rear tire, a chain in his hand. Andre's confidence cracked instantly. Hey, he shouted, voice echoing. What the hell do you think you're doing? This is private property. The man stood, broad, weathered, unimpressed. You Andre Covington? He asked flatly. I am, Andre snapped. And you're about to be in a lot of trouble if you don't move that thing. You're blocking my car. The man didn't move. He just gestured at the BMW. No, sir. I'm here to repossess it. Andre blinked, then laughed, too loud, too sharp. Repos, what? You're joking. This car's paid for. Corporate lease. Wrong car, pal. The man sighed, pulling a clipboard from the cab. Black BMW 7 Series. License plate 8 Kilo Victor 391. Owner, Mr. Andre Covington. That's you? Yes, that's me. And this is a mistake. Who sent you? AC Tech Solutions. The driver shook his head. Order's not from AC Tech, sir. It's from the title holder, Covington Holdings, LLC. Andre froze. The name meant nothing to him. He grasped at it like a lifeline, convinced it was a clerical mix-up. I've never heard of that company. Call them. Call your supervisor. This is a mistake. Sir, the driver said quietly, almost kindly, I've got a signed repossession order. You can take it up with the leasing company if you'd like. He turned, chain rattling against steel. The sound was deafening. Hey, get your hands off my car. Andre barked, his voice breaking. He fumbled his phone, dialing furiously. After what felt like hours of automated menus, a calm woman's voice answered, bright and practiced. Premier Executive Leasing. This is Sarah. How can I help you? My name is Andre Covington, he hissed. You people have made a massive mistake. You sent a tow truck to repossess my car, my BMW 7 Series. Cancel that order immediately. Just one moment, sir, she said, fingers tapping keys. Yes, I see your account. The repossession order was issued this morning at 8:05 a.m. I know it was issued. I'm telling you it's wrong. I'm sorry, sir, she replied in the same even tone. The lease was terminated by the owner of the vehicle, Covington Holdings, LLC. Andre's jaw tightened. I've never heard of them. The lease is through my company, AC Tech Solutions. I can see that AC Tech Solutions was the authorized user, sir, she said. But Covington Holdings is the legal owner and lessor. As per Section 4, Paragraph B of your agreement, they have the right to terminate at any time. The driver secured the last chain. The car tilted upward, its tires leaving the concrete with a metallic groan. Andre stood there, phone in hand, watching his symbol of success rise slowly into the air, and for the first time he felt the weight of silence he'd always mistaken for weakness. We are simply the administrators, Sarah said, her voice soft but final. Andre's thoughts spun in circles. It didn't make sense. He felt lightheaded, as if the air in the garage had thinned. This is insane, he muttered. Put me through to someone at Covington Holdings. I'll clear this up. I'm sorry, sir, she replied, and this time there was a firmness beneath the politeness. The sound of a door closing. We don't have a public contact number for that entity. All communications are handled through their legal representatives. We fulfilled our obligation by acting on their requests. A pause. This matter is now closed on our end. Closed. He looked up just in time to see the front wheels of his BMW leave the ground, his symbol of power dangling helplessly in midair. Is there anything else I can help you with today, Mr. Covington? Sarah asked, her voice calm and transactional, like she was offering fries at a drive-thru. Then, click, the line went dead. Andre stared at his phone, his reflection warped in the black screen. The injustice of it burned, thick and hot in his throat. The tow truck's diesel engine growled to life, drowning everything out. The man didn't look back as he drove away. The car chained and swaying behind him. Andre stood frozen, a man in a $1,000 suit, watching his empire's first pillar being hauled into daylight. The yellow hazard lights blinked once more before turning the corner. Then there was nothing, just the echoing emptiness of an expensive parking space and the faint, oily scent of diesel. If Monday had been the first tremor, Tuesday was the earthquake. The second blow wasn't about image, it was about power. While I sat peacefully on my porch that morning with a mug of coffee and a book, I knew my son was discovering what it meant when the current stopped flowing. He arrived at his office nearly an hour late, sweat clinging to his collar, fury simmering beneath his cologne. The $100 Uber receipt on his phone was a bruise on his pride, but he straightened his tie, stepped out of the elevator, and slipped back into the costume of control. His first stop was the Artisan Cafe in the lobby, his morning ritual of performative generosity. He swept to the counter, like a man accustomed to being obeyed. "Morning, Chloe," he said, flashing his polished smile. The usual for the team, 6 lattes, 4 cappuccinos, a box of pastries. Put it on the AC Tech account. He handed her the black corporate card, the one that whispered power when it hit the counter. The barista smiled, swiped, then her smile faltered. A single, shrill beep. "Sorry, Mr. Covington," she said, voice trembling. "It's declined." Andre blinked. "What?" "That's impossible. Run it again." She did. Beep. The cafe had gone quiet. A silence full of spectators. "Declined," she repeated, barely above a whisper. Andre's jaw clenched. "Your machine's broken." He reached for his wallet, pulled out a handful of bills, and slammed them on the counter. "Here, keep the change." He turned sharply and stormed out, leaving the untouched pastries behind like evidence of a crime. By the time he reached his office on the 30th floor, the anger had curdled into panic. He dropped into his chair, the glass walls of his corner suite, reflecting a man who suddenly looked very small. He opened his laptop, his kingdom, typed in his credentials. Access denied. He tried again. Access denied. His palms slicked with sweat. He hit forgot password. User profile not found. Please contact your system administrator. He was the system administrator. Panic bloomed cold in his chest. He clicked through tabs like a drowning man grasping for rope. Then a ping. A new email from director@actechsolutions.com. Subject: urgent notice of financial restructuring. He clicked it open, hands trembling. To whom it may concern. Please be advised that as of 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, the majority shareholders of AC Tech Solutions have initiated a comprehensive corporate restructuring. All executive-level access to accounts, credit lines, and expenditures has been temporarily suspended pending full audit. All consulting fees and non-essential contracts are hereby frozen, effective immediately. Further instructions will follow. The Office of the Directorate, Majority Shareholders. He read it twice. Then again, the words blurred. Majority shareholders. He'd never thought to ask who they were. He assumed they were investors, silent, invisible. He was wrong. His phone buzzed. Richard Lawson. He hesitated, then answered. "Richard? Hey. What the hell is going on, Andre?" Richard's voice was high, frantic. "My consulting payment didn't hit this morning. It's never late. The mortgage, the cars, everything's tied to that deposit." Andre's stomach turned. I don't know, Richard. There's been some technical issue. I'm looking into it." "Technical issue?" Richard shouted. "You said this was secure. You said you were in control. Brenda's asking questions. What am I supposed to tell her? That her brilliant son can't manage his own payroll." Andre opened his mouth, but the line went dead. He stared at the phone. The silence after Richard's voice was louder than any scream. The mentor he'd worshipped sounded less like a winner and more like a frightened child. The man who called me a loser had just been exposed as another dependent. Andre leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his reflection fractured in the glass. Outside, the Atlanta skyline shimmered, distant, untouchable. The second pillar had fallen. The structure of his world was groaning under its own weight. Wednesday would be the final lesson. Not about wealth, not even about power, but about humility. While I spent the morning sketching plans for a community library, a project that built rather than destroyed, my daughter Alicia was quietly setting the last motion in place. The eviction notice. That evening, Andre trudged home, shoulders heavy, his confidence stripped raw. The penthouse that once crowned his success now felt like an echo chamber. He opened the door to find Brittany pacing, phone in hand, eyes wild. "Andre, what's happening?" she cried. My card was declined at the salon. "Everyone's talking about it. Jessica said people are saying you've been fired. Is it true? Are we losing the company?" He dropped his briefcase by the door. The sound echoed through the empty air. "I don't know," he said hollow. "There's been a takeover. The investors, they've frozen everything." She stopped pacing. "Frozen? Our friends are calling me. They think we're broke." Before he could answer, a loud, deliberate knock hit the door. Not the tap of a neighbor, not the buzz of a delivery. A sound that demanded to be answered. Brittany froze, her eyes wide with fear. Andre's pulse hammered his ears as he walked toward the door, through the peephole. He saw a man in a crisp gray suit, mid-40s, clean-cut, carrying authority like a briefcase. He didn't recognize him. Lawyer? Banker? Whatever he was, he looked like bad news. Reluctantly, Andre opened the door. "Good evening," the man said, voice polite but stripped of warmth. "Are you Mr. Andre Covington?" "Yes." Andre's own voice sounded thinner than he expected. "Who are you?" "My name is Mr. Harrison. I'm the new senior property manager for the Oakwood." He didn't extend a hand. Instead, he held up a large manila envelope, the kind that only ever delivers one kind of message. "The new property manager?" Andre asked, confused. "What happened to Frank?" "Mr. Albright is no longer with the firm," Harrison replied smoothly. "There's been a change in ownership." He glanced down at the envelope. "May I come in?" He didn't wait for an answer. He stepped inside like a man inspecting his own property. Brittany stood by the window, arms crossed over herself, her voice trapped behind her panic. Harrison's gaze swept the apartment. The imported furniture, the art, the view, none of it impressed him. "This is a lovely apartment, Mr. Covington," he said, tone suggesting the opposite. "A premium unit," which makes this conversation unfortunate. He opened the envelope with mechanical precision and pulled out a thick document. "I'm here to serve you with a formal notice of lease termination." Andre blinked. "Lease termination? That's impossible. Our lease is paid up for the year. We have a special arrangement." "Ah, yes," Harrison said, his smile razor thin. "The employee incentive lease." He flipped through the pages, tapping a highlighted paragraph. "It's quite clear. Section 7, Clause C. This lease is contingent upon continued employment with an affiliated company. In your case, AC Tech Solutions. It has come to our attention that you are no longer employed in a qualifying capacity." "I haven't been fired," Andre said sharply, his voice cracking. "My access was suspended. It's temporary." "Our legal department disagrees," Harrison replied. "We received formal notification from the Directorate of AC Tech Solutions that your status has been fundamentally altered. As such, your lease is in breach of contract. The owners are exercising their right to terminate." He extended the papers toward Andre. "You have 72 hours to vacate. That's by 5 p.m. Friday. 72 hours. The words hit harder than a punch. Andre stared down at the page, dense paragraphs, legal phrases he couldn't parse. But the meaning was unmistakable. They were being evicted. Behind him, Brittany broke. A sound halfway between a sob and a scream tore through her throat. "No," she whispered. Then louder, "No, no, no." The whisper turned to a wail. "Vacate? Where are we supposed to go?" All our things are here. My clothes, my shoes. This is our home. She turned on him, fury twisting her tear-streaked face. This is your fault, she shouted, pointing a trembling finger. Your arrogance, your stupid fight with your father. You ruined everything. Brittany, stop. I will not stop. I gave up my career for you. I built my life around you. And you threw it all away because you couldn't just be a decent son. Her voice cracked. What am I supposed to tell my parents? That we're homeless. Harrison watched the scene with detached curiosity, like a man studying insect behind glass. My work here is done, he said coolly, slipping the envelope back under his arm. A moving crew can be recommended if you require one. Please ensure all personal belongings are removed by the deadline. Anything left will be considered abandoned and disposed of. Good evening. He turned and left, closing the door softly behind him, so softly that it made the silence that followed deafening. Brittany's sobs filled the void for a moment, then faded to nothing. Andre stood frozen, the eviction notice trembling in his hand. His eyes scanned the page, desperate for a loophole. A clause. Anything. Then he saw it, small print at the bottom. This notice is served on behalf of the legal property owners. Oakwood Properties, LLC. Oakwood Properties. Another name he'd never heard. A car repossessed by Covington Holdings. A company seized by unseen shareholders. A home taken by Oakwood Properties. It wasn't coincidence. It was orchestration. And there was only one man capable of building something this precise, this merciless, and this complete. The man he'd called a loser. His hands shook as he fumbled for his phone. He didn't think, he reacted. The number was still in his contacts. He pressed call. 1 ring. 2. Then that calm, familiar voice answered. Hello. The sound of it, steady, unhurried, snapped the last thread holding him together. You, Andre hissed, voice trembling with rage. You did this. All of it. The car, the company, the apartment. This was you, wasn't it? Silence. The same silence from the restaurant. The same silence he'd once mistaken for defeat. But now, he recognized it for what it was, power contained, waiting. When my voice finally came, it was low, almost gentle, but heavy enough to crush. Andre, I said, I think it's time we had a talk. He arrived less than 30 minutes later. I heard the rattle of the Uber's engine outside. Cheap, noisy, nothing like the silent hum of his BMW. I didn't go to the door. I waited in my study, the same room where this entire storm had begun. The doorbell rang once. Then again, harder. I pressed the intercom. The door's open, Andre. Come to the study. He stormed in, not like a CEO, but like a child who'd lost his favorite toy. His once perfect suit was wrinkled. His tie hung loose. His face was pale, slick with sheen of desperate sweat. He stopped in the doorway of my study, a small, quiet room that had always been invisible to him. For the first time, he looked around and truly saw it. The old oak desk, the shelves filled with books on history and engineering, the framed blueprints lining the walls. And he realized too late that this was never a hobby space. This was a command center. I sat behind the desk in my worn leather chair. I didn't stand. I didn't raise my voice. I just watched him. This was my ground, my design, my silence. The air thickened. I let the quiet stretch until he couldn't bear it. How could you? He finally exploded, voice shaking between rage and disbelief. How could you do this to me? To your own son? To your family? You destroyed everything. Everything I ever worked for. Worked for. The phrase almost made me laugh. Almost. But this wasn't a moment for laughter. It was a moment for truth. I looked at him, this man who'd built his entire identity on my money and his delusion, and saw a frightened boy standing in the wreckage of a stage he thought was real. I didn't respond. I just lifted a hand and gestured to the chair opposite me. Sit down, Andre. My voice was calm, steady, but heavy with authority he'd never heard from me before. The yelling's over. You've said your piece. Now you listen. He sat, stiff, defiant, but the fear was there just behind his eyes. He could feel the ground shifting. I turned the large monitor on my desk toward him. The screen was black except for one folder in the center, the foundation. You said you work for everything you have. I began, my tone even and clinical. That's a noble thought. So, let's take a look at your work. I clicked open the folder. Let's start with your greatest achievement, AC Tech Solutions. Rows of legal documents filled the screen. Do you remember 6 years ago when you pitched to those venture capitalists in California? Innovate Future Group? He nodded, a flicker of misplaced pride flashing in his eyes. They saw my potential. They believed in my vision. They did, I said, because I told them to. I opened a file titled Innovate Future Group Incorporation. The screen filled with incorporation papers, and one unmistakable line. Here, I said, tapping the name, primary shareholder, the Covington Family Trust. He frowned. What trust? I opened the next document, Covington Family Trust Declaration. My name appeared under grantor and trustee, his name under beneficiary, non-controlling. This trust, I said quietly, is mine. I didn't give you money. I gave you a play. I built you a stage with actors, scripts, and props, and you confused the performance for reality. I clicked to the next file, AC Tech Shareholder Agreement. 60% held by Innovate Future Group. That means 60% belongs to me. I turned back to him. You don't own your company, Andre. You never did. You're not its founder. You're its highest paid employee. And the board you've never met. I paused. That's me. His mouth moved, but no sound came out. Just denial. No, that's not possible. I built it. I didn't argue. I simply opened the next file. Let's talk about your car. The lease contract for the BMW 7 Series filled the screen. You said it was a corporate expense, I continued. A symbol of your success. But your company didn't qualify for that lease. Your credit didn't either. I pointed to the header on the document. The lease is with Covington Holdings, LLC. That's mine. You were an authorized user, nothing more. The moment your employment ceased to qualify, the lease was revoked. Simple, clean, legal. The words hit him like a body blow. That car, his prize symbol of arrival, was never his. It was borrowed shine. I didn't let him recover. Next folder, assets. The penthouse, I said softly. Your castle in the clouds. The deed appeared on the screen. Owner, Oakwood Properties, LLC. I clicked the second file, Oakwood Properties Incorporation. My name again. You said it was perfect, but just out of reach. You asked for help. I told you no, and then I gave it to you anyway. He blinked, disoriented. The lease, the employee incentive program. There is no incentive program. I said flatly. That was a story, a fiction. The management firm works for me. The truth? You were living rent-free in my building, in my home, and now that guest privilege is expired. The color drained from his face. Every illusion was gone. I watched him, the shaking hands, the slack jaw, the dawning realization that every triumph, every trophy, every inch of his self-made empire had been quietly built on my foundation. He looked up at me, horror and humiliation warring in his eyes. But I wasn't done. There's one more piece, I said. The keystone. I opened the final folder. Consulting. A single contract filled the screen between AC Tech Solutions and Richard Lawson Consulting. Your mentor, I said, the man you admire, the man you said was a winner. He stared. He recognized the numbers instantly. $50,000, I said quietly, every month, paid from your company's account, to Richard Lawson. His only income, his entire business, his entire lifestyle built on my money. He froze. The understanding hit him like a fist. The winner your mother left me for. I continued, each word deliberate. The man who mocked me over dinner is living off the loser's paycheck. I fund his mortgage. I pay for your mother's new car. The money flows from my trust through your company, straight into his pocket. I lean back. The winner she chose is still being fed by the man she left behind. His breath caught. a sharp, broken sound. And for the first time in years, Andre Covington, my son, had nothing left to say. The entire edifice of his life, his success, his heroes, his very sense of self, came crashing down in that small, quiet room. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy, final. He finally understood. He wasn't a player in the game. He wasn't even a piece on the board. He was just the ball, tossed between hands, never in control where he landed. I leaned back in my chair and slowly closed the laptop. The lesson was over. I didn't take anything from you, Andre. I said, my voice quiet now, no longer sharp, no longer strategic. I simply took back what was mine. A loser has to manage his assets carefully, you see. He looked up at me, hollow, shattered. For the first time in your adult life, I continued, you have a chance to become a real winner on your own. I stood, the leather of my chair groaning softly. Then I walked out of the room, leaving him alone amid the wreckage of his illusions. For a moment, I paused at the door and truly looked at him, really looked at him. For the first time in years, the arrogant CEO was gone. The spoiled son was gone. What sat there now was just a man, broken, quiet, stripped bare of every borrowed thing he once called success. There was no triumph in that sight, no victory, only sorrow. Sorrow for the years we lost, for the boy who had vanished beneath all that noise and arrogance. This final act had never been about punishment. It was about purpose. I know you don't understand right now, I said, my voice softer than it had been in a long time. And I know you hate me. Maybe you always will. But this was never about destroying you. It was about destroying the lie you were living. I gestured around the room, at the shelves, the tools, the blueprints, the evidence of a life built rather than bought. You've been living on a stage, Andre, performing success instead of building it. All I did was take down the set. What you're feeling right now, this fear, this humiliation, this emptiness, it's the first real thing you felt in years. This is a foundation. This is ground zero. This is where a man begins to build a life, not just pretend to have one. He looked up, pleading, searching for a lifeline or reprieve. I gave him none. The trust still exists, I said simply. Your name is still in it, but you'll never see another dime of my money, not until you've built something of your own. I let the words land. Get a job, Andre. A real one, not a title, not a role. Wait tables. Drive deliveries. Work construction if you have to. Pay rent on an apartment you can afford, not one you can flaunt. Earn $1 with your hands, not my signature. Learn humility. Learn respect. Learn who you are when you have nothing. I stood again, the old chair sighing beneath me. Maybe one day. I said quietly, you'll become a man I always hoped you'd be. Not a winner in Richard's sense, but a builder. A man of substance. A man whose worth comes not from what he owns, but from who he is. Then I closed the laptop. The soft click echoed through the room, small but absolute. It was the sound of an ending. I turned and walked out, leaving him sitting there, a ghost in the ruins of his own life. I didn't look back. There was nothing left to say. I don't know where he went after that. I didn't ask. My part in his story was over. The days that followed were quietest I'd known in 30 years. The house felt lighter, as though some great, invisible weight had finally been lifted from its beams. No calls, no emergencies, no polite manipulations wrapped in guilt, just peace. A week later, I was sitting on my back porch as evening settled over the neighborhood. The Georgia air was warm, thick with the scent of jasmine climbing the trellis beside me. A glass of iced tea rested in my hand, condensation dripping onto the worn wood of my chair. The rocking chair creaked softly, back and forth, steady as a heartbeat. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for anything. Not a crisis, not a call, not even forgiveness. I was simply present. I wasn't lonely. The silence wasn't absence. It was peace, a silence earned. I thought about that word, loser, the one that started all of this. For years, I'd let it hang over me like a verdict, pushing myself to prove something that never needed proving. I'd spent decades pouring my strength, my intelligence, my savings into a pit of their vanity, his and his mother's. just to keep their illusions alive. But sitting there, with the crickets singing and the air turning gold with dusk, I finally saw the truth. I had never been the loser. I had been the foundation, and they had built parasites on top of me. Now, the structure was gone, and for the first time in years, I could breathe. I hadn't destroyed anything worth saving. I had completed my final project, not a bridge of steel or a tower of glass, but the careful, necessary demolition of a toxic family structure. And now in its place, there was room, quiet, honest room, for something new to grow. I knew my own future was finally mine. The peace that filled my home was fragile like glass, and the sudden, jarring ring of my phone on the side table felt like a hammer striking it. I looked at the screen. Brenda. For a moment, I almost didn't answer. There was nothing left between us but history and habit. But curiosity, that quiet, human weakness, made me press the button. I didn't speak. I just listened. For a few seconds, all I heard was the sound of ragged, panicked breathing. Then her voice, shrill breaking, tore through the evening calm. "Reggie, thank God you picked up. You have to help us. Please, you have to do something." Her words tumbled out in a rush, high-pitched, frantic, unfiltered. "It's Richard," she cried. "He's ruined. It's all gone. The consulting contract. Andre's company terminated it. We got a notice this morning. The bank's foreclosing on the lake house. They're taking it. Reggie, do you understand? They're taking our house." I said nothing. I took a slow sip of my iced tea. She went on, her voice cracking under the weight of panic. "And the Mercedes, they're repossessing it. The payments were tied to his business account. And my country club membership was suspended. I can't live like this. This isn't my life." Her voice rose to a shriek, fear curdling into accusation. "This is your fault. All of it. You were jealous of Richard, jealous of Andre's success. You destroyed us, Reggie. You always wanted to tear us down because you couldn't stand to see us happy. How could you be so cruel after everything we had?" I listened, not with anger, not even with amusement, but with the quiet understanding of a man who has finally stopped negotiating with the past. It was a stunning performance, as polished as ever. In her world, she was a victim. Richard was the victim. Their debt-fueled luxury was an entitlement, and I, the quiet provider, was the villain who had turned off the faucet. No apology, no acknowledgement of what she'd said at the restaurant, not even concern for our son. Just desperation, the pure, hungry kind that sees compassion as a resource to be mined. And in that moment, I felt the last link, that invisible thread of obligation, snap clean. 30 years of being her safety net turned to dust, carried off on the night breeze. She was still ranting. Her words became a blur of pleas and accusations. "You have to fix this, Reggie. Call those people, the investors, the ones who own Andre's company. Tell them to reinstate Richard's contract. You owe us that much. You owe me." I let her talk. Then I let her stop. The silence that followed was long and sharp. I listened to the crickets. I watched a single firefly blink in the dark, its small light steady and sure. When I finally spoke, my voice was quiet, calm, and final. "Brenda," I said, "that's no longer my problem." I didn't wait for her answer. I didn't need to hear her shock or her fury or her pleas. I pressed the red button and set the phone face down on the table. The conversation, one that had lasted for 3 decades, was finally, mercifully over. I leaned back in my rocking chair. The rhythm returned, slow, steady, peaceful. The scent of jasmine drifted through the warm Georgia air. Above me, the first stars appeared, distant, silent, indifferent. I had reclaimed my dignity. I had reclaimed my peace. I had reclaimed my life. And in the perfect quiet of that southern evening, for the first time in 72 years, I finally felt like a winner. This painful chapter had taught me a lesson I'd spent a lifetime overlooking. For too long, I mistook providing for loving. I believed that financial support was the same as fatherly care, that patience was kindness, and that rescue was love. But I see it clearly now. Real love requires boundaries. Real strength is the courage to say no, even when it breaks your heart. Sometimes the greatest act of love you can give someone is to take everything away so they can finally stand on the solid, unshakable ground of their own making.